Hello everyone. What we're going to be looking at today is a risk register, and hopefully this is revision if you're in year 12, and it might be a little bit new if you're in year 11, but hang in there and follow through as we go through how to complete a risk register. So as part of any outdoor activity, before we run the activity, we have to make sure that all the risks have been managed and make sure the activity is safe for everyone that's going to participate, whilst still allowing that element of challenge and that element of perceived risk. So the activity I'm going to do an example with today is climbing. So we're top rope climbing at Onkaparinga Gorge. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is think about all of the risks that may be involved with climbing in a top rope scenario. So the risk description is the description of what might happen. Okay, so what are we worried about? What are we trying to manage? So I'm going to say the risk description is rock falling, from top, leaving student unconscious. Okay, so the risk description, what's going to happen? So the risk description can't just be rock falling. Okay, we want to know what is happening and what the consequence of that is. So we've got a falling rock and we're going to leave a student unconscious. Okay, so what have we got in place already that is going to reduce that risk? Okay, so think about all of the different scenarios of how we're going to reduce that risk. So we have helmets worn by all. Okay, another one of our controls would be students briefed about knocking things off the top. So before you start climbing, we would brief you on, try and avoid knocking anything off when you're doing the setups at the top or when you're actually climbing. So students briefed about knocking rocks off. Okay, what else might we have as a control? Okay, we have student preparation. So before we take students out into an outdoor environment, we would train them on the wall. So when they start climbing, they're not just flailing about all over the place. They're actually climbing with a bit of technique and they understand the activity and what they're trying to do. So the students have some experience. Okay, part of the briefing at a top rope scenario is to also have some terminology or some language around what happens if you do knock a rock off. So you would be briefed at the top before you go down that if you do happen to knock anything off, whether it's big, small, whether you think it's a rock or whether it's not a rock, you just call out rock. Okay, so students are briefed that if they knock something, they call out rock. And students at the bottom are briefed that if they hear someone calling rock, they would step into the cliff as close as they could and just keep their head down so that their helmet is facing up. Okay, so students are briefed about what to do if a rock is knocked off. So I'll just put students briefed there, you know what I mean by that. Students briefed about falling rock. Okay, the other existing control that we would have is we would have instructor knowledge of the area. So the instructor would know whether or not the area is renowned for loose rocks or debris. Some areas that you go to, if there's been heavy rain, there's going to be more debris. So the instructor knowledge and local knowledge, environmental knowledge, that will certainly help prevent this scenario when you're going to have a big loose block that falls off. So instructor, local knowledge. Okay, so we've got our risk description description, we've got our existing controls. Now what we're thinking about is if all of these controls are in place, we're going to consider these next 3 columns, okay? So we are going to consider, are these controls effective enough to reduce the risk of someone becoming unconscious from a falling rock? And I would say, yes, they are satisfactory. Okay, those controls are satisfactory to reduce that risk. The consequence of a rock falling and knocking someone unconscious, okay, the consequence is, I would say, when we're talking about consequence, we've got insignificant, we've got minor, moderate and major. And the way I like to explain that is insignificant is first aid. It's treated at the site, maybe parents are called. Minor would be that the victim ends up in hospital, okay, and needs some medical attention. Moderate would be someone is seriously injured and may end up in a serious condition and then may lead to 1 death, okay? And then we've got our major consequence where we end up with multiple deaths. So we've got more than one person who's going to end up severely injured or not around anymore. So that's our consequence. So if we've got a concussion, I would say that you could end up in hospital with a concussion. So we're going to say minor, okay, with the kind of rock fall that we're referring to in our thing here. Okay, now we're going to talk about the likelihood. So the likelihood is considering all of these things are in place, what is the likelihood of someone getting knocked unconscious from a falling rock from the top? Okay, so with all of these things in place, I think it's not rare, okay, but I think it would be pretty unlikely that someone would get knocked unconscious if all of these things are in place. Okay, so now we go down to our little table here and we need to work out whether we're going to treat this risk or monitor the risk. Now, if you've been clever enough over here, you will hopefully end up with a monitor situation here and you won't need to put anything in this last column here. Okay, so what we're hoping for is that the risk that we've got, we're just going to monitor it, be aware of it, and go from there. So if we've got a minor consequence and an unlikely likelihood, we've gone minor and unlikely, and we're in the green. Okay, so green equals monitor, and our red would be treat. So red equals treat. So we can add an M to here and therefore we don't have to add anything else to that last column. Okay, so that's how we fill in our risk register. For the activity you're doing, you may need to do 3 or 4 or 5 risks depending on what assignment you're working on, but certainly that should give you an idea of how to go about filling in that table. Excellent. Bye for now.